What's going on, everybody? Hopefully you guys had a good weekend. Speaking of the weekend, on Sunday evening, Bitcoin started moving up pretty good, and it turns out it's keeping its gains as we get into the first day of the trading week. This trading week will be a shorter trading week. It might be some lower volume. We might have some bigwigs on vacation, but let's talk about today. What's going on? We have SONY acquiring a Bitcoin exchange. Yes, they're getting into Bitcoin. I also want to show you a few of my favorite Bitcoin miners on the chart today, and let's get started. So far, you'll see that the stocks in general are pretty red except for large cap tech. And going over to Wgmi, this is the Valkyrie Bitcoin miner ETF Heatmap. It doesn't show all the Bitcoin miners, but it shows the Bitcoin miners that are in the Wgmi ETF. As a side note, I do hold that ETF. I do like WGMI. I think it's a great stock to get into if you don't want to decide on a miner, if you just want general exposure. But in general, most Bitcoin miners today are doing pretty well. And Bitcoin is having a beautiful recovery day. Does look like we're breaking out of our descending wedge finally. And this might be the beginning of a beautiful reversal. Now I want to show you something. I've showed you this before, but I want to show you something additionally. You'll see that every time we have come down here, getting towards oversold, once we start recovering, we don't come back down to these levels. We started recovering, we haven't come down to this level since. Back here in August of 2023, once we became oversold, we never came back to that level. When you're in an overall bull run, you want to buy when the market is panicking. You want to buy when you're oversold, and I do believe Bitcoin is still in an overall bull market. Based on the past, I'd say we have roughly around a year. Maybe the spot Bitcoin ETFs spice things up and change how the cycle works. But my expectation is we have at least around a year left of Bitcoin going much higher. Every time during this bull run that Bitcoin has gotten too oversold, it has not came back down to those prices. Of course, it has rotated from overbought to oversold throughout this bull run, and we will likely see more of that. Anytime you see an oversold RSI for the next few months, it'll probably still be a buying opportunity. You'll have to go all the way to the end of the bear market to see Bitcoin get to these oversold levels on the RSI to then get even lower in price. Every time we've bottomed out on the RSI, we have gone on to rally to then bottom out on the RSI at a much higher price for Bitcoin. Hopefully that makes sense. Once we start our recovery, we do have a nice rally. This could be similar to what we've seen throughout this whole bull run, where we continue to rally, continue to recover, and come towards our $68,000, come towards this resistance line. Once we can break out of this resistance line, I do think it'll be a huge deal for Bitcoin. Most importantly, breaking the all-time high. Combine this nice breakout with this inverse head and shoulders, and I do think we have a good shot of seeing 68,000 at some point in July. Our next goal is going to be seeing Bitcoin regain the 50 MA. On a recent pullback here, we tried to maintain it. You know, you saw that reaction where we tried to come back up and scoot back up, but it failed, and we did come down towards our 200 MA, which we haven't done since 2023. When Bitcoin's in an overall bull run, you got to take these opportunities. You got to be bullish on Bitcoin. Following the cycle, we are nowhere near the end. Following the RSI on the weekly and monthly, we are nowhere near the peak. Looking at the fact that we're only a few months from the halving happening, I mean, these things take some time. It takes a little bit of time to see the supply and demand mechanic really play out. Recently, we've been seeing miners selling. What happens when they start hodling again? What happens when we start seeing consistent inflows from the spot Bitcoin ETFs? I do think new all-time highs are right around the corner. Maybe it comes in August, maybe it comes in late July, maybe it comes in September. Is 2.5 to 3 months really that long of a time to be able to still accumulate and to get ready for Bitcoin to continue its run? Of course, Bitcoin isn't as attractive here as it was back in the 15K days, back in the 20K days, back in the 30K days. But I do believe, looking at the peak of Bitcoin's price, we are much lower than that. Now, we've got some pretty big news coming from SONY. $105 billion is the market cap of SONY. They launched a new Bitcoin exchange. SONY Group acquired Amber Japan and is relaunching it as the S-Blocks Bitcoin and Crypto Exchange, marking SONY's expansion into the Bitcoin space. The exact date of this launch is unannounced. SONY's in the perfect place to do this. Japan has emerged as a leading Bitcoin market due to proactive regulation and high consumer awareness. And the big thing is not necessarily this actual headline. The big thing is we're seeing these big companies getting into Bitcoin. This is what we want to see. There is a lot of interest. And this is speculation by the writer, but Sony's past acquisitions of companies like CBS Records, Columbia Pictures transformed it from an electronics firm into a global media titan. Its latest acquisition could spark a similar evolution for Bitcoin. Does Sony become a giant in the Bitcoin space? Time will tell. All right, now let's talk about CleanSpark. We were up right around 10% earlier today. What are we up now? 9.5%, still doing good, up 9.5%. One thing you'll notice for CleanSpark is we have had a couple of gaps. I'll ignore this $10 gap. I do not think it's going to fill. It is not a common gap. It is what's called a breakaway gap. I suggest you look that up. I've talked about it before. We did recently fill our gap here at the 15-16 area, and we literally just went there to fill that gap and recovered afterwards. Now we're coming up filling this gap. Are we going to chop around here for a while? I think it really depends on Bitcoin. And I don't know if you guys would call this a divergence, but we're getting a divergence on both sides. We're seeing higher highs on the RSI, but we're seeing lower highs on the chart price. We're also seeing consistently higher lows on the RSI here, but we're seeing a really choppy kind of a pattern here. So there's definitely some divergence here. It's bearish and bullish divergence. Eventually, one side will take control. We will eventually get out of this chop. I do think it depends on Bitcoin's next move up. I don't just say that because Bitcoin and the Bitcoin miners are so closely connected. I say that because Bitcoin has found its all-time high as resistance for quite a while. We've been hovering at these all-time highs between 74 and 65-ish for quite a long time, even coming down nearly to 55. I've talked about this interesting pattern before. It's like a broadening bullish pattern. We've hit the resistance a few times, we have hit the support a few times. Maybe we come down and test the support anywhere from the 14s to the 15s, 16s maybe, if we get it as late as August. But you know, I do think CleanSpark will follow this general direction up and to the right. Do we come down and test our 200 MA down at $12-ish? I wouldn't hold my breath. Next up, let's talk about Btbt. This one's getting into AI. AI is quickly becoming a big portion of their business, bigger than the Bitcoin mining, bigger than the Ethereum staking. And honestly, I'm okay with that. One thing you'll notice is we got a nice spike in volume on this nice bullish day. That is a good sign. One thing you'll also notice is we are very near a golden cross. It is a lagging indicator. Thanks to this positive move, I would expect if we just trade sideways from here, we'll still see this golden cross. It is just a matter of time playing out. Honestly, even if we drop a little bit, we'll probably still see this golden cross play out. I do expect Btbt to continue to follow this ascending support. Maybe we come down and kind of test it, you know, revert to the mean here. We're looking at a golden cross coming very soon. Btbt is continuing to consistently create higher lows, higher highs, and we are breaking out of previous local highs. On top of that, we're seeing some very high volume, the most volume we've seen in this whole entire bull run. Maybe we see a similar move to this back when Btbt had a good spike in volume and had really good momentum similar to here. Now, what do you guys think about this SONY news? I think it's a positive that we see these larger and larger companies getting into Bitcoin, whether it's exchanges, whether it's just simply buying Bitcoin. And we will see more of this. We will probably see these large companies start acquiring Bitcoin miners as well. Things are going to dramatically change over the next couple of years, and it'll be really exciting to see how the rest of this bull market plays out. To me, 6 figures is in the bag. Do we get to 150? Do we get to 200? Do we get to these outlandish 300, 400, 500,000s? That remains to be seen. I sort of doubt it, but I do expect at the very least we're going to get into the 6 figures. Bitcoin will join the 6-figure club, and many of these miners rallying along with it, many of these miners outperforming even Bitcoin. And let me know what you guys think about this SONY news. Let me know what you think about the Bitcoin miners today. It'll be very important to see what the spot Bitcoin ETFs post today. I would expect that we see inflows, just seeing how Bitcoin is done. At least we didn't see a sell-off into the market. But yeah, thanks as always for watching, guys, and I'll see you on the next one.